Session with Dr. Farid Holakouee.
Good afternoon. Welcome to In Session. I'm your host, Dr. Farid Holakouee, and I'll be with you for the next 2 hours here on Radio Hamra. Studio number to call in, 310-441-0555. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist, so you can call in with any questions related to clinical psychology, including any emotional or psychological issues, parenting issues, and relationship issues as well. You can follow me on Twitter or Instagram, or like my page on Facebook to get updates on the show or suggest topics or books for the program. And the shows are uploaded at the end of each week to my SoundCloud page and podcast on iTunes and Spotify. Again, the studio number 310-441-0555. And speaking of the studio, we are in our new studios here for Radio Hamra. It's been an adjustment even for me today, trying to get to the studio and get in here on time, dealing with parking and different things. So it is an adjustment, and actually I'm going to start the show talking about dealing with change and how change is always a little bit tough, even if it is a good change. So I'll get to that in just a second. The book of the week for this week is The Problems of Philosophy by Bertrand Russell. The Problems of Philosophy, Bertrand Russell. He is considered, if not the greatest, but one of the greatest philosophers of the 20th century. So the recent books I read both came out in the last week or so, or last few weeks. And then this book was written, I think, close to 100 years ago, or maybe more than 100 years ago. So sometimes like to mix it up and read some classics as well as some newer books. So looking forward to reading the rest of this book and sharing with you on Monday's show, The Problems of Philosophy by Bertrand Russell. So as I mentioned, we are making some changes, or have made some changes, to get into the new studios here at Radio Hamra. And actually wanted to thank Ghazaleh, who is here in the studio with me right now and working, so I think she can't actually hear me. But when I was doing the show remotely from my father's home, she made things go as smoothly as possible. So this is the first time in a while that I'm doing the show with her in the studio like this, and also it's in a new studio. But wanted to give her a big thank you, and a thank you to everyone who's helped with the transition so far. And so, as I said, I wanted to talk about going through changes, because it's been interesting that this has not been a huge change. Changing buildings of where you're doing some work, doing the same kind of work, and even the studio, as far as the setup is the same, as far as the structures we have here with the microphones and things. So a lot of it is familiar, but you're in a new setting and location. And I did notice even on Monday's show that it did impact me in some hopefully minor ways. Maybe listeners will maybe notice a difference too. But it was a reminder of how change always is a little bit hard for us. And it also is related to the book I shared on Monday's show, which, as I mentioned, I really loved it and recommend it highly. 7.5 Lessons About the Brain by Lisa Feldman Barrett. And in that book, she talked about a lot of things. Obviously, there's these essentially 8 chapters. The first one is the half one, but it's also important. But different lessons really in each chapter. And one of them was that your brain is not for thinking. It really is more about budgeting your body, the resources of your body, and making sure you survive. And of course, our brains do think, and they're involved in creativity and abstract thinking and a whole bunch of other things. But she was saying that if we really think of what the brains do, or what they are trying to do, they are trying to help keep us alive. And one of the things they do in allostasis is to predict what we need. So should you go towards something? Should you go away from something? Do you need to allocate resources for drinking water, or getting food, whatever it might be? But that's what our brains are really meant to do, of course, to survive, then eventually pass on our genes to the next generation. So that was an interesting topic, that your brain is not meant to think, or that's really not its primary role, or in a way what it was created to do, or how it was, why it became the way it was. But that more was to predict what you need to do. And even an interesting thing was I mentioned getting water and being thirsty, that it said something like it takes about 20 minutes for water to get into your bloodstream. So if you're thirsty and your body is saying we need water, you drink water. But as soon as you drink it, you feel less thirsty. Now, it didn't say this. I think sometimes our throat feels dry, but I don't know what impact that has. But essentially, the point she was making is that your body already feels like it's okay because in past experience, when it had water, this issue of being thirsty or of needing water was resolved. So you feel not thirsty anymore, even though the issue of balancing the water in your body has not been fully resolved because your body or your brain is predicting that it's going to be okay. So it's quite interesting. But related to that, we can see why change is always going to be a little bit tough on us, because the way that our brains are working is that it's making predictions, and it can only make predictions based on past experiences. So if you've done something many times, then when you're doing it again, the brain has more to use to predict what's going to happen. And that was another chapter, that our brains are predict almost everything that we do, that our brain, rather than just taking in all the information, it's doing a lot of predicting and then checking what is around us in some level. So it's not that you don't see what's happening at all, but it's not that you're taking everything in, but there's some prediction, and then your brain is resolving the discrepancies between what it's predicting and what it observes or what is going on around it. And so if you are in a new environment, understandably, your brain is not going to be able to predict as well as it could in a familiar environment. And so this is why familiarity breeds comfort and breeds even attraction with people, is that when you are more familiar with something, it can make sense that your brain has an easier job of budgeting or knowing what to do or what's going on. And so this is why we always say change always involves some kind of loss. So let's say you're changing your job, even if you're going to a better job, a job you're looking forward to, it involves some level of loss of what you had already. Or if you're changing your car, even let's say you're getting a car you really like, saying goodbye to that old car is some level of loss. But another way we can think of this concept of change always involves loss is that it involves some loss of your resources or your ability to budget the resources, or for your brain to do that. It's always going to be a little bit uncomfortable in a new environment. You're going to have to adjust to it. And so we have to be ready for this, because what that does is it makes us not want to go into new situations. Something I talk about a lot is our comfort zones and being comfortable, and how we tend to try to stay comfortable. But living a comfortable life or staying in your comfort zone means you're going to be unfulfilled, unsatisfied, and unhappy over the course of your life if you just stay in the comfort zone. But based on these things I'm talking about, we can even see at a brain level why we would prefer to stay in familiar territory and familiar ground. And that's all comfort zone is we stay in an area and relationships or whatever it might be that we're familiar with, and it feels easier, and we can understand that. And so it takes some effort to go against that. It takes some effort to break out of the comfort zone. And because of that, it always can feel wrong when you want to go into that unfamiliar. Even if it's something better, even if you might know it's better, we can understand that at another level it feels wrong. Like I should just stay where I am. Maybe it's better just to stay put, or to not break up or get divorced, or to not apply for that job or switch careers or whatever it might be, because it's always going to feel unfamiliar, and to your brain it's going to be harder to predict what to expect and what's going on, and that puts a little bit of stress on it. So it was interesting for me in reading her description of the brain and how it responds, and really how it's trying to predict things more than it's just about thinking in the way that we tend to, no pun intended, think about it, is that it makes sense that unfamiliar things will always feel a little bit off or wrong, or we won't want to go in that direction whenever we can. We'll try to stay where we are. So it does take a little bit of effort, and you have to be ready for that. That your brain might be telling you don't go there, or at least in some way saying don't go there, but we can override that by being aware of where that's coming from. because our feelings are important to help guide us. You have a feeling, you know what, my gut feeling said do this or do that. And that can be an important thing to listen to, but sometimes our gut feeling isn't always going to be right. I think so we're usually looking for simplifications. I'll hear people say, your gut is always right. If you listen to yourself, it's never wrong. And I do think that people tend to not be aware of a lot of what they're feeling, a lot of what they might be thinking or wanting, and all of that, which is important to get in touch with. So there's something to that people don't trust or listen to what their body and brain is telling them in a lot of ways that actually could be good. But I also don't agree that it means it's always right, because sometimes what we are feeling is going to take us in the wrong place for exactly the reasons that I've been talking about now, that it might draw you to the familiar, which might be unhealthy. Your gut, that feeling inside of you, might draw you to be attracted to the exact kind of person that's very bad for you because it's familiar from your past. You had an abusive parent, you might be drawn towards a violent or aggressive partner, and it might feel right. In a way we can say our radars are sometimes off in some very harmful ways. So it could be easier to think you can always just trust what you're feeling and not have to think about it at all or to evaluate it at all. But I don't think that's going to lead you to the right places all of the time. And so we have to recognize that it's not going to be that black and white to just trust some gut and think that it's right, because it could take us exactly in the wrong directions as well. But being aware of that, and the more we understand, the more we can make better decisions. So you want to do something new, you have to be ready that there is going to be a part of you that's going to say, ugh, this doesn't feel familiar. I don't know if I want to go there. And so you have to balance that with other things that you are seeing in the situation to determine what you should do next. Should you make the change or not? But we know that from our brain standpoint, change will always feel a little bit not okay. There's at least one part of the calculation that's going to be in a negative direction. And so we want to see, is that what's really driving me away from it? Or is it really other things that might be more important? Change is always hard. We're talking about a minor change here, changing the studio, but even that takes a little bit of an adjustment. And for me and for everyone else here, I think it's been a bit of adjustment, but we're settling in. And that's even what we think about that. When you say you're settling in, once you get more comfortable in a space, once it becomes more familiar, then you lose some of that feeling of unfamiliarity that makes you feel like you don't know what to do. Your brain doesn't know how to really manage what's going on there. So we're managing, we're getting there. Big thank you again to everyone who helped us do that. Let's get to our first commercial break. Studio number 310-441-0555. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Studio number 310-441-0555. In this segment, I wanted to talk about something that I've been hearing from a lot of people because we're getting into the winter months, or the days are getting shorter, and that is seasonal affective disorder. So seasonal affective disorder is essentially depression or mood changes that people can experience based on the seasons, especially and most commonly that when we go into the winter months, the days get shorter, weather gets colder, they can experience symptoms of depression. And some people know this about themselves, that in the winter months they can experience a lowering in their mood. So it could be things like low energy. Obviously mood can be low, depressed most of the time, or more often than not, losing interest in activities. So a lot of the typical symptoms of depression, but especially could be things like oversleeping, eating more, feeling more tired, all those kinds of things. And so before I get into some other aspects of it, if we think about it from a evolutionary perspective, we can see that there might be something adaptive or that we can understand about seasonal affective disorder, about feeling this way. Some animals like bears, we know they hibernate in the winter. And so it can make sense to some degree that our bodies, our brains are adjusting and recognizing what's happening, again, going into that predictive ability of our brains, or one of the main abilities of what our brain can do, to recognize as these months come along, food might be more scarce, there might be less time to be awake because of what's happening with the length of the day. So it can make sense to conserve energy. It can make sense to be a little bit more slow in how you're acting and what you're doing, so you don't need as much to eat and to use, and so this can affect how you are. So interestingly, we can understand an adaptive, in the sense of from our evolutionary perspective, way of how it affects us. Now, of course, in our life now, where for most of us, even in the winter months, we're going to be fine. You can be warm, you can have access to as much food as you need, but our brains and our bodies sometimes don't match the new environment. We have to think of when our bodies have evolved. Of course, evolution doesn't stop, but the main ways that our brain and bodies have been adapted to is not the current environment that we live in. And so sometimes there's a mismatch or a disequilibrium where your brains and bodies are not living in the right time in the sense of when they're adapted to. We even see this when it comes to sexual relationships, for example, where when we think of how sex can work, it's about reproduction, but oftentimes in today's day and age, people are precisely wanting to make sure they don't reproduce when they have sex, right? So there's ways that we're being driven to certain types of behaviors that are a mismatch for the environment or what we're actually trying to achieve because of living in a different environment or a different time. So when we look at seasonal affective disorder, we can understand why our brains and bodies might go through certain adjustments in the winter months. It could be triggered by less access of sunlight. So when we receive the sun less, the brain and the body is preparing that we're going into this period of time. And so there are things we can do to try to counteract that. But first, it's just something to be aware of, that either you or a loved one might experience some of these types of things, where in the winter months you might notice that. Some people will notice it in themselves, or they maybe didn't realize it. We all might go through it to a certain degree. People will talk about how, the day is getting shorter, or why is it already dark at 4:30 p.m. It does affect us, and we are affected by the light or the lack of light or the lack of sun. It does affect everyone, but like anything, some people can get affected much more severely, to the point where they actually fall into a depression during the winter months, and it's quite common. And of course, if you're already susceptible to depression or issues with mood, you can be more likely to be affected by this as well. So something just to be aware of for you, your loved ones, people around you. Even I think I've when we look at the holiday season, like Christmas, Hanukkah, all those things, and when they're celebrated, there could be some reasons why Christmas is celebrated. I don't know the whole history of it, but during these winter months, the shortest days, because it's a dark time, quite literally in the sense that there's less sunlight, but people feel more down, and it could be good to have something to celebrate or reasons to get together and be together to lift our spirits. That can make sense. Or in the Persian culture, we have Shab Yalda, where we celebrate the shortest day of the year, essentially the longest night, which also can have that effect where we're celebrating this time, which actually can be a sadder time where people might feel more sad because of that, to try to counteract how you might feel during that time. So again, you could have issues related to depression that might make it more likely for you to have that. If you have a family history of depression or a personal history of depression, you are more likely to experience that. And also, if you live in regions where the sunlight becomes even less. So the further you are from the equator during the winter time, if you're in the northern hemisphere, the days are going to get even shorter, and the reverse is true for the southern hemisphere. The more south you are during their winter, which is the opposite time of here in the northern hemisphere, the same thing. So people who live in the Nordic countries, or in Alaska, for example, during the winter, your sunlight might be 1 or 2 hours a day, if that. And so that has even a greater impact. Here in Los Angeles, we're a little bit closer to the equator, so much closer than Alaska, so it affects you less, but it still happens here. So that's another thing to be aware of. So it's something to pay attention to yourself or others. As far as treatment goes, it tends to be similar to treatment for depression. So some people will take medications like antidepressants and things like that. Also, light therapy is something that is done. So one of, as I mentioned, what could be causing seasonal affective disorder is receiving less sunlight. So there are some things that are quite literally light therapy, where it's a special type of light that people are exposed to that can help them to maybe rebalance the circadian rhythm, the daily patterns, so that they can feel better or to have less of an effect. So in a way, you're tricking your body into thinking it's not going into the winter, so to speak, because you're receiving more of that light. So medication, as always, psychotherapy can be helpful for any type of mood issue, looking at some of the thoughts or behaviors. If you're doing some kind of CBT, things like that, that can be helpful as well. Meditation can be helpful for all these types of things. But to some degree, it might be something you just experience. And so that's also something I wanted to talk about, that I'm very much in favor of recognizing what's going on and seeing if you can treat it in some way, if you can do things to counteract it, keep yourself physically active, get the light therapy, even maybe go to therapy, potentially taking medication if it gets to that point. But also something I always try to promote on the show is to recognize what we're going through and being able to accept that as well. So that if you do get more depressed during the winter months, try to do what you can about it, but also be aware that it could be just something that you deal with. And how am I going to deal with that? We can't always just remove the ways that we feel or the things that we go through. We can try our best to make them a little bit easier to get through, but we don't always remove that. And you even can tell people around you about that. If you have a partner or people that you're close to and you know you're going to go through this, you can let them know so they're aware that during the winter months, I might get a little bit more down. I might go through these periods where it affects me in this way. And just so you're aware of that, so they understand. And so it's not just about this, but about anything, to really share with the people around you what you go through. Because one of the unfortunate things is when we're looking at depression, or especially if it's a specific time period where you might be able to expect it, but in general, when we go through these different things, because we're afraid to share it with one another, we tend to isolate ourselves even more. So I can't tell you because I feel embarrassed or ashamed that I go through this, or I'm going to be down or in low energy. You know, people even say, oh, who wants to be around someone who's in a bad mood? Which it's true that we all get affected by one another, but everyone goes through bad moods, bad times, and we want to hopefully be there for one another. But what's sad is that people tend to feel like they have to isolate because of that. People don't want to be around me when I feel this way. I'm embarrassed or ashamed that I feel this way, so I shouldn't tell people. It's something to hide. I'll go into my own kind of hibernation and then come out when I'm feeling well again. And you can choose to do that if that's what you'd prefer to do. But oftentimes, if people actually felt like they could be loved and accepted when they're feeling that way, they would actually want to be around other people if they let them be that way. And that's the other part, right? So if you see someone who's in a down mood, you might think, I need to cheer them up. I have to make them happy instantly and make them good. And then if you can't do that, you might feel powerless or frustrated or upset, or you might even get upset at the person for not cheering up, and you might not want to be around them. So sometimes the best thing we can do is to recognize, I'm not going to make you totally okay or make your mood totally happy, but I can be around you. You know, if you want to just have company or to have someone there, and I'll understand that I'm not responsible to make your mood okay, and I'll understand that this is okay. You're down for a while, but you'll be okay again or feel better. We can just be around each other and share that company. I talked about on Monday's show the studies that have shown things like when you hold someone's hand or a loved one's hand, the brain areas related to pain, if you're going to receive a shock, will be even less. So it doesn't take away the pain. It doesn't mean you're not feeling any pain, but you might feel less pain. We can make it easier to tolerate getting through a difficult time for our loved one. So that's why I think it's so important for us to recognize that we can share these things with one another. What I see is people get depressed, and a very common symptom of depression is wanting to withdraw and isolate. So sometimes the person wants that, but sometimes it gets exacerbated by feeling like they shouldn't be around people. And this is even one of the reasons why therapy can be helpful, amongst the different ways that it helps, is that by sharing that down period with someone else. It's like you're in a dark cave, and the therapist might not pull you out of the cave, or even a loved one doesn't pull you out of that darkness, but they actually might come sit next to you in that darkness. And that can be hard for some people to tolerate, but that's what we want to be able to provide for one another when we give them the space to feel what they're feeling is, okay, you're in a dark space. I'm not going to tell you it's actually bright where you are. I'm not going to tell you or force you to be happy or come to the brightness, but I can join you in that darkness for now, where I can at least temporarily be there. I might not always be there for you or with you. Even as a therapist, it might be a short period of time, but I can sit next to you in this darkness. And that itself can be helpful, because when we're depressed, we feel isolated, we can feel ashamed. And if someone can show us that it's okay, that we're not feeling okay, that can be very powerful and very helpful. So it's important for both sides to keep this in mind. We all will be on both sides of this. If you're the person going through something, hopefully you have people around you that you can share that you're not feeling well, and they'll let you not feel well if that's how you feel. They'll give you the support you want, but they'll make you feel okay if you are feeling down. And if you're on the other side, someone tells you they're not feeling well, first of all, take the pressure off of yourself. You're not supposed to just make them happy or totally take away their pain. Almost always you can't do that, but you can just be there for them. And that itself can be very meaningful. Just your presence is a lot. And a lot of life is about that, just being present with someone else. Even as a parent, it's a lot about connecting, but just being there for the child is what helps build a secure attachment. Of course, interacting and responding to the child's needs, but your presence is what's really important. And we still have that feeling as we get older. Just having someone with us makes it a little bit easier. And think about the different fears you might have. Usually the person, if you have someone support you, they can't do anything about the fear, but just having someone there helps. Hold my hand while I do this thing that scares me. The person holding your hand doesn't take away whatever it is you're scared of, but just that safety, that connection is important. So I just wanted to, first of all, make this the point about seasonal affective disorder, to be aware of it if you have that yourself or people around you do. And we talk about disorders, it doesn't mean everyone's going to get a full-blown depression, but you might even notice it affects you in some ways, or it affects you more than others. Even if you don't think you fall into a depression, you can still have the mood or the tendencies that come up with it. And also for those of us to be aware of our loved ones that might be going through that, and whether it's the seasonal affective disorder or any type of pain, mental pain that they're going through, that we want to just be there for them. We don't need to change them or fix them. Just being there can be enough. Let's go to another commercial break. Studio number 310-441-0555. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Let's go to a caller. Radio Hamra, you're on the air.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Farid, for taking my call.
Sure. Thanks for calling.
Surely. So my issue is I need your help. It's about a man that expresses interest, personal interest rather, towards me. But I have some reservations, which I will tell you.
Okay. And
I could use your help to identify his interest.
Okay. Now, before we begin, obviously we can talk about it and we'll see. For me to tell you his interest or his intentions will be difficult, obviously, but we can explore it, because at the end of the day, he'll be able to tell you, the only one that really can tell you. But yeah, we can explore at least from your side, especially what you're thinking and what's going on. So go ahead.
All right. So as a contractor to the government, he is a VP of that company. But the contract that I was involved with at the time, it expired actually about 7-8 months ago. And before that contract ends, we were going to be reorganized to another contract. And he actually pulled me aside I didn't know about his interest at the time. And he mentioned that he would look after me and, other people to seek other positions. And he did try, actually. So I reached out to him with an email about 2 months ago, just asking, if he can help with the other positions that I applied. And I expressed how I was disappointed of the means that didn't help as much. So he asked me to arrange for a meeting call, and the meeting call went pretty well. And then he followed up and he said, hey, would you like to meet for lunch? And let you know that the contract that I'm in, he's no longer part of that contract.
Okay.
So it's not business conflict at this time. But then I agreed to meet him after 6 because of, meetings throughout the day wasn't possible. And so when I met him at the place that he actually asked me to choose in my area, and he was very nice, and but the irony was that the meeting was supposed to be talking about the business opportunity, but he actually ended up talking personal.
Okay.
Asked me a lot of personal questions about myself, and I was surprised because I didn't know. And so I was kept it professional, and I answered the questions, and it was a pleasant evening. But and then it followed up with just a couple of texts and again, I wasn't sure how this is going to work out. And I asked him, I said, is this a personal interest that you're pursuing? And he said, yes, if I'm not involved in the contract that you are, I don't see why not. We can pursue personal interest. But what I'm coming up to ask you is, for the past month, and we met another time for lunch, and he does tell me that he's interested. And I told him, yes, I'm interested because he's also divorced, I am. And so there's no problem with that. But it seems like he shows he's interested and he wants to meet, but then there is no word coming. And again, I'm not quite sure if I'm getting mixed signals, or is it something that I need to come up and, be straight with him and ask him? And because I'm not used to chasing men.
Well, we don't want no one should need to chase anyone. Hopefully, does it feel that way for either of you to be chasing? But yeah, I guess so. When you can explain maybe what you mean by him not following up, and obviously there can also be cultural things. I don't know his background, your background. That could also affect things as well as how people approach each other. So maybe I can get some of that information from you also, if you know his age, and then how old are you, and get some understanding of the background there.
Yes, they are both middle-aged.
Okay, that's a wide range.
Try to get that out of women.
Yeah. Well, this is more of a clinical kind of question than that way, but
No, it's upper 50s.
Okay, still general, but okay, upper 50s is good enough. Okay, and then how old is he? He's also middle-aged.
I think he's older, probably early 60s, but I didn't ask him, But he has 2 grown-up kids, and he is American. And he actually, it was interesting that he told me that he knew Hormus Sapsi in Tahdig.
All right, that's good. So he knows some of the better things of our culture. That's good. So when you say he's been the mixed signals, or what you consider mixed signals, what has been mixed about it? He's not following up as much as you'd like. He's not contacting you as much as you'd like.
Well, I mean, he showed that he's interested, and he gave me his personal email address. He gave me his phone number. He actually contacted me through WhatsApp. And it seemed like when I initiate the conversation, he's really good at it, but then it's just going to be left alone. And when I mentioned that, yes, we need to talk further, then he's like, definitely we must, and then that's it.
Huh. Okay.
It's just like an open-ended conversation.
Well, or it seems more like you mean open and then ended conversation. So yeah, I could see how you're not sure what his intention is or how he's pursuing. Culturally, sometimes there are differences, and I know you said you don't want to chase him, but I think talking to him about what his intentions are. I know you said is this personal or professional or whatnot, but that was just one level of really understanding what he's looking for. And before even you ask him, and I'm going to ask you now, it's good for you to think about what are you looking for?
Well, based upon the conversation we had from our first meeting and then the second, it seemed like he's really the type of person that I would be interested to invest in.
Okay.
But then again, I'm not quite sure if I would, let's say, offer, because when I offered that, okay, yes, we need to meet again, I thought it's best if we can just have a good conversation, person in one-on-one, instead of just texting each other or. But at this point, I'm not quite sure if I need to say, okay, when are you available? Let's get together, or just wait for him to make the next move. I know I'm not 20s anymore. I'm not 30s, and but still.
Yeah, I don't know the exact age, but I know you're not 20s or 30s. That's true. So yeah, I don't want you to get too fixated on these parts of like how does it approach. It seems like he showed interest, and then now the part that it seems like you're confused is if he showed interest, why is he colder now or not showing as much interest or following up, which I think it's okay to bring up and talk about. When was the last time he contacted you?
Well, we had text online, but I would say 5 days ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't. Yeah.
Something that I'm sorry. Just to let you know, something that he mentioned that he's actually involved in, busy at work because they're proposing few government contracts. So I understand that, but again,
Yeah. Okay. Well, it seems like you want him to be more involved and more engaged. I get the sense from just our conversation so far, you like to have control over things, and here you don't have the control. No one doesn't like having control, but for some of us it could feel even more like you're wanting him to do something he's not doing, and I think that's already frustrating you.
Wow. I think that's a good analogy. But I don't want to sound like I'm frustrated or I'm desperate. It's just that.
But see, there you're saying sounding like I'm not. I can understand that you're frustrated, and I hope you can give yourself that. So it's not that you, and I get when we're talking about dating, people can be focused on how they're coming off and things like that. But I think it's very okay for you just to be very real with him. I think that's true for everyone, and not to worry so much about sounding frustrated or sounding a certain way. You might be frustrated, or you are a little bit confused by how he's been approaching you, and it did of course start in this very ambiguous way because you work together, and even when he first was maybe asking you out, you weren't sure if it was work or personal, and so it's been this kind of ambiguous start, and it's still a little bit hazy, and you want some more clarity, which I think is understandable really at any age. I think that's important. Younger, you said 20s or 30s, but whatever the age is, clarity is important. So I think I'm not going to say exactly call him today or text him today, but soon you could try to get more clarity from him of what's going on. But I do think, as I said, wanting control is something that I get the sense you want to have, and you want to know exactly what's happening. And so sometimes we might push too hard. It's like we have to know everything and be very clear, and that could actually, we have to be okay with not knowing some of what's going on. So some of what you're probably dealing with right now is the anxiety of not knowing exactly where you're at with him, which understandably doesn't feel very good. But we have to find some balance of we can get clarity, but we're not going to have some perfect clarity to know exactly what is he doing, what does he want to do, what's his plan. He might not give you all of that yet, when you guys have only just started kind of connecting in this way?
Right. I look at it as a typical man.
Okay, so tell me about typical men, and keep in mind I am a man, but go ahead. Tell.
I'm sorry.
No, I'm just joking. But what do you mean by typical man? So that's actually good, because see, what we're always doing is we're filling in the gaps. Even I was talking before about our brain predicts, but especially in relationships, we're filling in, right? You don't know that much about him, but you're already filling in based on your own past experience, different things. So tell me what that means to you when you say what I see as a typical man.
Well, I mean, they always describe men as a hunters, right? And then they chase, and once they found their
prey,
prey, and then they probably lose interest. So I'm playing it.
I'm not. That's not the most romantic story I've ever heard. Yeah, so it's about prey, and then they kill you and they leave. That's very. That's not going to be in a Hallmark card anytime soon. But okay, so but that does show there's some, that feeling that you have about men is something for you to look at and think about, because that's what I meant by you already are filling in the gaps, that you're saying, see, he's a typical man that just sees me as prey and wants to hunt me, doesn't want something serious, just, wants to hunt and then go. And so, of course, that's going to impact. And in a way, you're kind of telling him, prove me wrong that you're not that, or in some ways, prove me right, because see, all men are that way. So you have to be aware of those things that you're bringing into this, I don't want to say relationship yet, but this kind of communication and interaction with him, that you're bringing in those experiences from your past and already telling him he is this. And so that's another reason why you want that clarity. It's like you want him to prove to you that he's not that kind of guy, but you might be asking for that proof too soon. You have to already tell me you're not this and this and this, It's like, prove to me you're not a cheater, let's say. It's like, well, no one can really prove to you that they're not a cheater in the first interactions. Hopefully they show you that they're trustworthy in the basic ways they can up to that point, but they can't show you that. And sometimes people, because of their anxiety, they say, are you the kind of guy that's going to cheat on me? Or are you the kind of girl that's going to this, or because they're so anxious about that. And really the truth of the matter is, no one says, yes, I am, to a question like that, but we still are looking for that confirmation of something. So it seems like there's some issues with trust that are coming up here as well, which, you don't have to give him all your trust yet. You just give him as much as he earns over time. Trust is earned. We give a basic level just to start communicating and connecting with someone, but they earn our trust. And so I get the sense you want to know, it's almost like you want to see the whole movie about you and him before it even starts. And so to some level, there's going to be some not knowing that we'll have to accept. Even if we look at what you asked me, which did ring a little bit to have the same flavor to it, you said, I want you to kind of, basically you're saying, I want you to tell me what this guy's thinking and what his intentions are. And I can't, I don't know. You're going to have to find out for yourself and through communicating with him. And I would hope you don't think that communicating means you're chasing him. Again, you're not going to get all the information from him, because a lot of it he can't even give you, but you can try to understand what are his intentions more clearly in some due time or pretty soon. And again, you're only going to deal with what he tells you, because see, if you're telling me typical man, then you can say, oh, see, he said this, but he's not going to do that. He's saying he wants something serious, but he's just saying that to keep me around. So, he's going to have to show you, and you have to trust that he's going to show you over time, but we don't know how this movie is going to play out and how it's going to end. You'll have to just play your part. You can't be the writer, director, and actress in this movie. You have to be just your portion of acting in it, and together you and him will in some way co-direct or co-write what happens, but you can only write your side.
Woody Allen did all that.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. That's so funny you said that. I was thinking of like a Woody Allen, acted, directed, and written by the same person. Yeah, it would be nice, or it would feel nice to have that much control over what's going to happen. But that's a movie, which is not real life. So unfortunately, in real life, we can just act our part or be our part, and then we might co-write a story with the other person. But we'll see. Is it going to be a short story? Is it going to be a long story? Will there be sequels? That you're going to have to figure out with him. But recognize that, not knowing is one of the hardest things for anyone, but it might even be it's definitely harder for some people. So this not knowing seems like it's bothering you. And we don't want that not knowing to create an anxiety and a desire for certainty that actually might even push him away or make this not work out. Because if you want to know everything too soon, you usually will make it end too soon. So being a little bit patient, which is tough. But I think don't feel bad that if you want some more clarity from him, again, it's not going to be perfect clarity, but some more clarity soon, that doesn't mean you're chasing him. You're just trying to understand some level and communicate to him what you are looking for or what you want. You're allowed to have wants that I like to communicate more or connect more. You can express those things to him.
Okay. Well, sounds like a good plan. I'll do that.
Yeah.
But
good
the
luck.
only thing is that it bothers myself that I'm also excited of not knowing. And once it's straight out and clear, then I lose interest.
Oh, interesting. So maybe you're the hunter.
Well,
because, it's interesting. Exactly what you said is what you said the men are going to do. They interested, and then as soon as they kind of have you, they leave. So, sometimes we project our own ourself onto other people. So in some ways you might have been projecting that onto men or others that they're going to lose interest because that's something you do or you're afraid you'll do. So that's interesting. And some of the not knowing keeps you excited but nervous but then once you feel like you lose interest. That's also an interesting thing for you to look at. Why do you not like the guy that's giving you what you're saying you want, right? So if we look at now a little bit more of the full picture, you were saying, oh, these guys are so bad because they don't give you interest and they don't stay with you. But now you're saying when they stay with me, I want them to go or I want to go. So it's complicated.
Oh, yeah. I'm a very complicated.
We all are. We have to kind of unpack all of that and try to understand it a little bit better. And, with each interaction, we can learn more about ourselves as well. But it's something to be aware of and to notice that what we even, explored today, sometimes what you might be thinking about him, ask yourself, am I that way? Or is that something about me that I'm projecting onto him? Because often that is the case.
Very well said. Thank you.
Nice talking to you. Good luck.
All right.
Take
Thank
care.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, let's go to another commercial break. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Let's go to another caller. Radio Hamra, you're on the air.
Hello?
Hello.
Hi, are you with me?
Yes.
Hello, Dr. Farid Holakouee?
Yes, you're speaking to me. Nice
Hi,
to talk to you.
Thank you for taking my call.
My pleasure.
I want to ask you a question, more kind of help me to understand what I have to do. I have a daughter. She's 24 years old. And just to give you a little bit background, so I'm a single mom. So she's 24, and then she has in a relationship now, call it as she has a boyfriend, which I met the boy, but then my first impression wasn't really great about this relationship, but I kind of didn't want to say anything. But later on I found out there are more kind of serious going on between her and him. I just wanted to know, when you have someone, basically consider you have an adult child and it's not anymore consider a minority, what is my position if I feel like this is not the right person for her? When should I say her, just to help her to understand my point of view? Is it my right to be a little bit aggressive about if something is not approved by me? Like, what should I do? I feel like I'm knowledgeable. I feel like I have a very good relationship with my daughter, but then now we're getting to the very sensitive topic, and I don't want it to hurt her. At which point I have to be very straight and tell her why I'm thinking this is not the right person for her.
Well, I mean, already, you're assuming that you have to tell her, which I'm not saying you shouldn't, but you're saying at what time do I tell her? And so this is, a challenging issue in the sense that you're concerned, and we can even look at what those concerns are. But because it's obviously her life, her relationship, she has to be happy with this person. We have to make sure we are giving her that space as well. And most of the time parents will think, they're not always wrong, but they are very clear that I know better than my son or daughter about who they should be with. But we do have to have the humility that we could be wrong, or we might not know, or especially we might not know for them. It's what they want. And so we have to, it could be your opinion or some of your concerns, but I'm not saying you said this, but I hear this a lot from parents where they say, I know my kid will be unhappy. I know this is not going to work out. And they're convinced, and they're convinced as if they know some fact, which actually I think is true of how people talk about a lot of things these days. I talked about it a bit on Monday about in politics or social policy. Everyone thinks they know exactly, but they don't really know. So we have to first come into it, I think, with that mindset that you don't know. You might have some concerns or thoughts about it that you might want to share with her, but that it's not that, because sometimes parents will tell me, well, I told my kid and she didn't listen. I told her she needs to break up. Well, that's the problem, is that you went into the conversation that I'm going to tell you this truth because I know, and then you have to act based on the truth I'm telling you to end this relationship immediately. And so I would make sure you don't go into any conversations you do have, if and when you have them, with that mindset that the goal for this conversation is to convince her to break up. The goal could just be communication and sharing from your side, only if she wants it. Also, that's kind of part of the if part of having this conversation. But it's not that, sometimes people can feel like, well, the conversation didn't go well because she didn't listen to me. That to me is not really a conversation. That means you're giving her an order, essentially. That's not really a conversation. So conversation goes both ways, and also a conversation, even to have it, the person has to want it. It has to be both parties want to have it, and both people should be contributing or sharing things in that conversation. So just a few things to keep in mind, in that if and when you do talk to her, that I think those things are important to have in the approach. Now, before we get into how or what you would say, I'm curious about what are these things that you are concerned about when it comes to her boyfriend.
Yeah, I just wanted to give you a little bit more information because recently I noticed she's hiding a little bit about basically a relationship she has with this boy. So, I call it boy, he's a younger man.
Well, that itself shows something, right? That you think they're too young to make a good decision, that they're just little kids trying to get to know each other. But tell me a bit about what you've learned that you're concerned about.
So then basically they went to the trip. So, it just happened for me to know that, and she thought I don't know, but I didn't say anything to her until she comes back from the trip. And then I just very honest question I asked her, like, who did you go with? And for her first response was nobody. And I asked her again, I said, are you sure? So it was nobody was with you? And then she kind of paused, but she wants to examine me to see if I know it. Then again she said, yeah, nobody. And then I said, but I know about this. And all of a sudden she started to apologizing, say how sorry is that, she's not feeling well about hiding this from me, but she knew it I wouldn't be agree. So she started to opening that conversation about, I don't usually like to lie, but you give me kind of, vibe about you're not happy with this boy, but that's why I hide it, so I don't know what I have to do. So that's kind of the conversation went. So on that time, I found this is opportunity for me to talk about it. So I said, I'm telling you one time, and I'm not going to repeat it again, but I'm going to tell you why I'm not basically agree or I feel like I don't approve this person if you're going to have a long relationship. And then she said, what do you mean by long relationship? You're happy together. I said, so what is the meaning of happy together? So you're 24, the other person is 30. So are you guys not thinking about it too, looking as a future kind of partnership? And she said, we are happy right now. We don't know where we're going to have it. And my daughter is a person, she always said, I don't believe the marriage. She always said, I don't want to have a kid. So we're just happy together at the moment. Why would I be bothered about what is the next 2 or 3 years? I said, what about the guy? They said, he's 30 years old, so also he's thinking the same as you? And then she basically claimed, yes, so we are kind of together, we are having good time. And I said, the reason I'm just saying to you, because, for example, one thing I am not quite sure he's the right person because of his, he came from a very religious family, and we are not religious, so we don't basically practice in any specific religion. I said, this is something you maybe find out it might be causing a problem for you in the future. Maybe you guys are happy together. Now it's more than 1 year, but then if you're thinking about it, living together, someone grew up in a very, very religious family, I'm sure he does have some affection about that. He said, yes, he does. I said, okay, so that's first thing. That's what I feel like this is maybe comes as a problem in the long relationship. Secondly, my daughter, she's in medical field, so, and the guy is just having 4 years, bachelor. I thought, but in the future also, you may find out your position as a doctor maybe would be different from the person who's just basically 9-to-5 job. He has it. I'm not making it a judgment call, but I'm just saying in the future, you're making a lot of difference as far as the money concerned, and it comes as a problem. That's also my second issue. And the third one, I said, just generally, I feel like it might be this person distract you because you are in the position of study abroad, and she wants to come back to the origin country, and she needs to study a lot of, board exam and things, and would be a distraction. Which she doesn't believe it is a distraction. She feels like actually good because she feels good when he's around, he's helping her. That's part she doesn't agree with me. But the first one about religion, I think she was agree. But the second about the differences as far as their status, also she said, what do you mean? Do I need to, because I'm going to become a doctor, that means I'm going to always have a doctor or lawyer or something like that? I said, no, I don't say that, but I feel like it has to be something compatible, like it not to be huge differences. But also she's not agree with that. So I said it. I said, I'm not going to say it again, but these are my concerns, and you can decide what you want to do. But I know they're together. I know basically nothing has changed, and I feel like, okay, at which point I have to be more straight or should just let it go?
Yeah,
and
so
just let her to make her own decision and basically own mistake.
Well, but see, that's so. I mean, I think you said a lot in what you said, not just about what you were sharing, but about where you're coming from. Like you said, it's a mistake, which is, the opposite of what I was recommending in how you approach this. Is that you don't. Now, you obviously can't take back what you already said to her, but that you don't assume and to be honest, in hearing what you said, I don't think it should come as a surprise that she was hiding some things from you, because look at your reaction, to telling you that you're already going so far ahead, and this is why, as I was saying, and again, you can't take back, but also for people who are listening, it should be a conversation. But you gave her a lecture. And even it wasn't just a lecture, it was that I told her these 3 things that are the truth, and she only agreed with some of the truth. She's still figuring it out, the rest of the truths that I was sharing with her. So very clearly you were telling her, I know this is wrong, this is bad. And of course she's going to tell you even less about it. She's not going to tell you more. And I don't know enough about the relationship to say it's right or wrong, but just as an approach, I think what you've unfortunately done is you've closed a lot of the doors of communicating with her about this, that she already knows you're so against the relationship that she's not going to share with you. And unfortunately, what I've seen this so many times, both professionally and personally, but parents will do this, and then even if your daughter right now does have concerns about the relationship, she's not going to tell you, which is the unfortunate part, that you've closed that door, that she could potentially come to you and say, Mom, I'm worried about this. He said something or he did something. But because you've attacked the relationship so much, she has to defend the relationship, defend him, and defend her choice in being with him to such an extent that she's almost not going to tell you anything unless it gets so big, but she won't tell you about things she's unhappy about or concerns she has. So by coming down so harsh, you've taken away a lot of those opportunities, unfortunately, or potentially closed some of those doors. Doesn't mean completely, but might have closed those doors. Now, we're at a commercial break.
I got so hurt, but I found out she's lying because
But even
I
that
thought
with
we always have an open conversation.
right. But even
with my daughter.
that, I understand, and so we're going to get to that because even that's something we could look at. What I'm not saying I would blame you for her lying completely, but we have to look at the relationship. We're at a commercial break, but I want us to continue. So I'll put you on hold, and we'll talk after the break. Okay?
Sure.
All right. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Before the break, we were with a caller. Let's go back to her now. Radio Ham, are you still there?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
For taking my call.
Of course, yes. So, there's a few, you shared a lot about your daughter, 24 years old, your concerns about her relationship, and then also your recent interactions with her. There's obviously a few major points here. One is about, you mentioned right before the break that you were hurt that she lied to you about traveling with her boyfriend, and then of course the relationship itself. But since you mentioned that, that you were upset, and as I mentioned, I wouldn't put that blame 100% on you, that if your daughter lies to you, it's your fault, because I don't think that's fair or accurate. But to be aware of, from your side, always looking at, if she does lie to me, was it something that I made it hard for her to tell me the truth or to be open and honest to me about that? So you did seem like you wanted to share some things about that before the break too, but also if you can think about that aspect of it as well. But tell me what you were thinking before the break about that, her not telling you the truth about traveling with him.
Because I thought we always have an open, conversation with my daughter. So, she always felt like I'm very open-minded. Mm-hmm. But she said, Mom, for certain things I found that you're not basically open-minded. It's okay. More like because I met this gentleman, so when at one of the point I was there, and then I didn't say anything. So I knew it. My daughter is with him. I guess the fact they're traveling together, I think that was my daughter find out that would be hard for me to know about. Like basically, traveling. That means they're in the same room, and that sort of the thing is not easy for me to accept it. So that's why her comment to say, you are good with a lot of things, but once we get to that sort of topic, there's a taboo, and I don't feel comfortable to talk to you, and I feel like this is because you never actually make me comfortable about this. And I agree with that. I said I'm working on it. I feel like that this is my weakness. Growing up in Iran, but being in another country for 24 years or 25 years, I still feel like even in my own personal relationship, I have issue with that part. Now I'm passing to my daughter, and my daughter is 24. I basically makes her very uncomfortable about traveling with someone or being with someone. So then I said, in the future, I really want you to try to not lie to me and try to be honest with me. Even if you find out if I get upset, I want you to practice and trying to say to me, and I do my best to make it not that much, hard on you, and then I trying to obviously work on myself and find out what is basically how can be a better mother, more kind of guiding you, not to coming as an order. So
yeah, and that's important.
That's what I call you.
Yeah, and that's important because
I call you to ask you to see what is your professional opinion in that matter. Yes, I kind of screw out in that part. I understand that, but I want to make it better. Sure,
and so you're right. Obviously, you want to encourage her to tell you, but also that's from her side, but especially from your side, it's that being as non-judgmental as you can be about what she shares, that's completely on you. How you respond to what she tells you is going to be on you. Now, telling her tell me, and it's good you said I don't want to get as upset or angry, but sometimes parents will tell their kids, tell me whatever you want or tell me everything, but then they respond in a certain way that doesn't make the person comfortable. Like parents will say, tell me what you got on your test, don't worry, and the kid says I got a D, and then they throw a tantrum and break things and get upset. Well, of course the kid's not going to tell you next time they get a bad grade. So our response is completely on us. What she tells you is on her, and of course there's a relationship there, because the more calmly you respond to what she says, the more easy it is for her to tell you things. Now, even if we look at this idea of traveling, and you're right, it's cultural things and values, but what is important to, if we look at why that's even a thing, from my understanding of it, is really essentially just that it confirms a sexual relationship. And that's what people have an issue with. Even, I'm not totally sure about this, but what I've heard about, the way you say boyfriend or girlfriend in Farsi, when you say that, it implies a sexual relationship. So people don't say that, they say friend, right? They say dust. They don't say dust dokhdar, dust pesar, because that implies a sexual relationship. So we have, in all cultures, you still have some of this, that this, the woman's sexual relationship or having a sexual past is given a great significance. But in Persian culture, and as in many cultures like ours, it's even more significant. So really, when you talk about traveling, I don't think you're worried what if they see the Eiffel Tower together, but you're worried about if they're having a sexual relationship and people know about their sexual relationship, right? So it's not about traveling so much as this, they were in the same room, and that has certain implications. So that is a cultural difference, and you do have to accept that she's going to make her decisions about her sexuality, sexual relationships. That's going to be completely up to her, and she can talk to you about it, but you have no say in it, whether she has a sexual relationship or not. And even if they don't travel, obviously they can still have a sexual relationship. But I know traveling has this certain, it's taboo for a lot of Persian families because of those implications that it means there is that sexual relationship. So we all think we're open-minded up to the point of the things that we're not open-minded about, where we think we're right to be concerned about them. So it's just something to be aware of, that, to you open-minded, you maybe even think I've made progress, but compared to her living in a different culture and different generation, she probably will still think you're pretty closed-minded about things. And you're never going to be exactly like her as far as how open-minded you're going to be, because that's the intergenerational and the conflict of culture. But you can try to be more open-minded and accepting that these things I worry about also probably I don't need to worry about, and also I have no control over. Her having sexual relationship is up to her, and you have to give her that space to decide what she wants to do. And again, going back to something I brought up in the last segment, and I'll mention again, the more judgmental you are, the less she's able to talk to you about it, even if she has a concern. So if, parents tell their kids from a young age, sex is this really bad thing, or drugs, you can't ever do it, we'd be ashamed if you ever took something. Well, now if the kid is having some issue where they took some drug and they don't know what to do, they'll be afraid to tell their parents. Whereas if they know they can talk to you, that actually allows for them to communicate, get your support, get your feedback, or whatever it might be. And so we have the same thing with you and your daughter now, where she feels like she has to hide these things. And I know you thought we had this open relationship, and it doesn't mean you don't have openness in other areas, but sometimes when the kid is younger, it's easier to have an open relationship because they don't have anything to hide. But then when they get into adolescence and young adulthood, there are things that they don't need to tell you about, or that don't need to be told to you, or that maybe they know you won't like. So she won't be telling you about these things.
But one thing, I agree with you, but one thing actually I examined myself, it was a question for myself, if I want you to see in that lens to see if I'm correct or not. Because yes, I have some issue with that sexual kind of concept about this, but then I said to myself in my kind of time, to be honest, if I would agree that person, if I knew it, she's with someone which I agree and approve that person, it's basically reached my standard, then would I be that much upset? And I couldn't answer that question. I couldn't say yes. I was just honest with myself, said I would probably were okay with that because I was okay with that guy. You know what I'm saying?
Right,
I don't really 100% say it's a sexual thing. I feel
Sure.
like because I am not agree with approving this person, then it becomes more issue for me. Oh, okay, now you're traveling also. That was sort of the thing.
Well,
That issue.
right. So yeah, that's probably true. I'm sure it does have an effect. Who the person is, and I've seen that obviously is going to have an impact. But if you then look, if we take a step further back, you're saying I have to approve and accept who she's in a relationship with, and then a sexual relationship with, and that's not your space to make that decision for her. That's her decision to make. So you're probably right. And even in some of your questions, well, what about the future? What's going to happen? You have to let her not only figure that out, but even, as I was saying before, let her tell you about that, rather than the way you described the conversation. You were telling her this is not going to work out for X, Y, and Z reason, rather than having a conversation with her where she can share what she wants. Even the way you said, well, does he want it? It wasn't you were asking. You were saying, look, it's already wrong or bad. If we look at your tone, it was very much like an interrogation, or even like, she was on the witness stand and you were the opposing counsel, acting as an attorney to try to prove that she's wrong, or that, you're right. And so it was a very attacking type of a conversation, at least the way I heard what you shared with me. And so you have to understand that that's how she heard it. And even if we look at what you asked me, when's the next time and how aggressive should I be because I have to make her end this? That still, to me, sounds like your mindset is, I love my daughter, I care about her, and I know this is wrong. How do I end this relationship? And to me, it's not your space to do that. And the only relationship you might end, or at least affect negatively, is your relationship with her.
Okay. So what should I do then? What do you
So I know now you're okay. That's all fine and good, but how do I end this thing? So, and I understand where you're coming from. By the way, is she your only child?
No, actually, there's another one.
Okay, older or younger?
Than her, yeah.
Younger than her. Okay. Well, so we're gonna, you'll get to do this all again with the younger one. You'll get to have all these fun experiences.
It's kind of role model now for the other one.
But see, even when you say role model, I don't think you meant it in a positive way.
And it is a positive way, very positive
Okay.
way, because she's the older sister is very, very, very influenced on the younger one.
Yeah.
In a positive way.
Okay. I thought maybe you meant in the case of the relationship it was a negative influence.
No, I think, no, I didn't mean that.
Okay.
But what I'm saying, she's already trying to actually teach me, Mom, you shouldn't do that. It's like she's kind of like trying to maybe make it the way it may happen to her. What should I basically react? But because she's 22. But so how I can hear my question. I know we're getting to the end. How I can correct that, like the mistake I made it, I got it.
Well, that's the first step would be acknowledging, even if you don't want to say mistake, that has maybe certain, you can call it that, but the way you reacted, if you acknowledge it as a mistake or you could have done it better, I would say rather than focusing on him and her, focus on you and her. So you can talk to her and you can let her know, when you brought that up, it was a lot. You found out she might have lied to you, which also we didn't get into that, how you found out she was lying to you, but we don't have to get into the detective work you might have done to figure that out. But, and even that might make her feel a certain way.
No, that was just a mistake. I think she texted me to let me know, and her sister said, don't do that, because Mom is not going to be angry, and she deleted it. And then it was too late. I already saw that one.
Okay.
But I didn't say anything.
Yeah, but
I want to hear from her.
Yeah, even I didn't hear anything. I get it. I mean, you wanted to see, but having an open conversation, not that you should tell them everything either, but you want to be open both ways. Like you share, look, I saw this, I want to know what's going on. Let's talk about it. You're not trying to trick her or trap her. You hopefully will want to have a conversation with her about what's going on. So I would acknowledge that, the way I responded, I could see how it made you feel judged about going with him, and also about this relationship. In a way, I'm a concerned mom, but I think the way I expressed it probably made you feel judged, and that I was judging you, judging him, judging this relationship. And I wanted to, I don't want to put words in your mouth. So obviously what I'm sharing, you have to think about it and say it if you want to, but in whatever way makes sense for you. But that I wanted to apologize for that. And because essentially what you're trying to do, what I would recommend is create a different dynamic between you and her. Again, I wouldn't focus on him at all. Take him out of the equation as far as what you do. Focus on you and her. I want to be able to communicate with you, or I want to know more. Like, have you asked her what she likes about him, what she likes about their relationship? Let her tell you about the good things rather than you just telling her about these bad things that you quote unquote know about. Give her that space to share with you from her side. What does she like? And don't say, she might say things where it's like, but what about, don't go there. Let her just share the good and let it stay there at least for a little while. You're going to have to try to repair the broken bridges of communication between you and her, especially about him, where it's probably completely damaged or really severely damaged, but even in other things where she can be more open with you. Because what you're seeing is what's going to happen. It's not that you're going to change her behavior. She's just going to do what she wants anyway and not tell you, and you're going to get more distant from her. You're not going to even get the...
No, you're
cool.
absolutely right,
Yeah.
because I realized that if that, conversation happens, if she's not talking anything about him at all. So she used to be say something about, he does this, or he does, who brought me this, or but now nothing.
Yeah, and we can understand that. I don't blame her for that. And so letting her know, and the hard part is because you have to really mean it when you say, I don't know that he's not right or this is not right. But I think right now you're still convinced that you do know. And so that's going to leak in, because if you try to even lie to her about that, she'll feel it, or it's going to come out over time. But really checking with yourself to recognize, maybe I don't know. And knowing is not this thing that it's very black and white. It's, you have some concerns, and then you've already expressed them, so you don't need to again. But it's about having conversations with her. So I would focus on shifting it. Again, him and her, that's about her to figure out. You and her, you have more than probably 50% effect on that relationship. And especially right now, in some ways, the ball is in your court to try to repair it. So I would approach her and think less about him and focus on repairing your relationship with her.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Nice talking with you. Good luck.
Thank you. Thank you.
Take
for
care.
taking my call.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
All right, going into our last commercial break. We'll be right back. Welcome back. I wanted to end the show continuing on the topic that came up with the previous caller. I appreciate her calling and sharing her story, a story that many parents of young adults and older adults can relate to, of what to do, how to intervene, should you even intervene in your children's relationship. And so I always want to be careful when I talk about someone who we just talked to when they can't, of course, respond. So this is going to be more of a general discussion, not specifically about her case, but of course will be related to some of the things that she brought up. So, even that first question of should you intervene, and the overall adage would be less is more when it comes to how you intervene with your child's relationship. For many reasons. To begin with, it's their decision to make. And as I shared with her, the general assumption that parents often will have is, I know this is wrong. And so when we have that kind of a mindset, if I know my child is going into danger, how could I not get them off that track, prevent them from going towards that danger? So when we have that assumption, and really we don't think of it as an assumption, we think that we really do know, then we could convince ourselves, well, I'm being a bad mother or father if I don't prevent them from walking into danger. And so there are a lot of assumptions there. The first one is you don't know. You might think you do, but you don't. And you have to recognize that first, because if you approach it with I know, then everything else becomes different. You think, okay, I know, but I won't tell them that I know, and I'll play this game of showing I'm not sure and who knows, but really all I'm trying to do is make this relationship end. That's my only goal. And that's not creating a relationship or a communication with your adult child. Essentially, you're just forcing your own agenda onto them and telling yourself it's because I love you and I'm protecting you, but really you're taking away a lot of things from them and from your relationship with them. So we first have to swallow that pill of humility and recognize, okay, I maybe don't know. I have these concerns, I have these worries, but I can't say I know. And so that's all I can do. Now, what's actually interesting is a lot of times those concerns you have, your child might have them too. They might be aware of those things. But if you approach it and attacking them about those issues, then they're going to get defensive about those very same things that you can actually, if you approach it differently, have a conversation with them about. Let them talk to you about it. So first and foremost, we have to approach with the mindset of less is more. And even, I would say in some ways before that, and really recognizing the whole bigger picture, I can't say I know. First of all, because you're not a relationship expert or a life expert. No one is to know, even if you are a relationship expert, if you're a psychologist. If I have a friend going through a relationship, I can't say I know. I might share concerns if they talk to me and they want to get my opinion, but I can't say I know the relationship is going to go this way or go that way. It's much more complicated than that. Another part of not knowing is that they are the one in the relationship. What's important is that they have to see what they like, don't like, what they can handle and can't handle. And also they're seeing the person up close in the relationship. They're experiencing them. So you're not trying to, pick a partner for you. They're picking a partner for themselves. So you can't pick that for them to say, oh, you don't like that they're this way or they're that way. That's for them to figure out what they like and don't like. And that's another reason why you don't know, because they have to pick who they want to be in a relationship. Sometimes I see people and they say, oh, you're not going to want to be with a woman who does this or a man who does that. But that's maybe what you want or what your own preferences are. It doesn't mean that's what your child is going to want. So being aware of that is very important. So we recognize we don't know, even though you think you do. And I'm sure people listening to me right now are like, yeah, okay, I can pretend like I don't know, but I know I do. But okay, I hope you'll really try to recognize that and accept that. But then when you look at how you approach it, the approach should be more, I want my child to be able to share with me, not to get information to then use against them. So I'm not trying to do an investigation, but really because I want to understand from them. So if they're dating someone, rather than being on alert and that protective parent coming out and saying, okay, what's wrong with this relationship? Find out what's right about this relationship. Okay, good. Tell me about him or tell me about her. Let them share with you what they like and maybe even what they don't like. Maybe if it's the beginning, just what they like will come out more, and try to understand it. So your focus, as I mentioned with the caller, it's not on the relationship between your child and this person. It's between you and your child. How do you maintain that or keep that strong or keep things going well when it comes to your relationship with them? Not thinking about how do I either make this relationship end or promote this relationship. Sometimes parents, of course, can have that other side. Oh, maybe my son or daughter doesn't see how good this person is. I have to push them towards this person. I have to make it work. So again, less is more. You are not trying to make this relationship happen or make it end. You're going to be there as a supportive parent, as a parent, and be involved in that way, but you're not going to make it end or make it survive. First of all, you're not that powerful. Sometimes we can make it end just by being destructive, which is really horrible because, again, the relationship you affect the most is the one between you and your child. But usually you can make it work no matter what you do. They have to like each other, love each other, and try to make things work out. It's not going to be up to you. But what you want to try to create is a dynamic where your child can share with you, which is true about anything. They want to talk to you about career. They want to talk to you about drugs and alcohol. They want to talk to you about a friend. You don't go into lecture mode. You go into listening mode. Let them share with you what's going on with this relationship that they like or they don't like, so that you can hear them. Because what ends up happening is if you don't do that, you're not going to actually learn from them what they're going through. As I alluded to earlier, oftentimes your child might have concerns about the relationship, or realistically, they always will have some. Things will come up. They have their own concerns. But if you approach things in such a negative way, they won't share them with you. So I've seen it personally and professionally where they're fighting about things and the parents are saying, you should not be with him, what's wrong with you, or you shouldn't be with her, we're not going to accept this, we won't even come to the wedding, we're going to disown, whatever they're saying, all those things, and the child is defending, no, you don't know him, he's so this, he's so that. And then when you talk to the person one-on-one, they actually say, you know what, I'm kind of worried about this about him. Or we sometimes fight about this all the time. And so the child starts sharing, and I say child, but I mean an adult, but the child in this scenario of the parents who are worried about their child, and they're sharing the things that they're worried about. they're saying there's this issue, there's that issue. They're not sure. But of course, if you're attacking them, they have to defend it and fight for it. And if anything, what you're doing is you're pushing more towards that person, because they're saying, I'm losing my parents, at least I have him or I have her. And they go more towards that. And again, you're affecting your own relationship more than anything. So we have to, as always, take a step back. What am I trying to accomplish here? The first and most important thing is, rather than focusing on that relationship, am I going to keep them together, get them apart, or whatever it is, focus on the relationship that you're actually involved with, that you have the most effect on. That's your relationship with your child. I want to make sure I keep that relationship good, because that's the one that is in my control. That's the one I'm supposed to make decisions on as far as how we relate to one another. And that's the one that I want to preserve and keep healthy as much as I can. And if that's the case, I want to have a conversation with them. And lastly, I would give them the benefit of the doubt to make their own decisions. One, because I want to show them I believe in them and trust them. And two, they have to go through their own experiences and their own lives and see the ups and downs and make their choices. I can't pick their partners for them, and I can't pick that they're going to break up with someone, because that's not good for their development. So yes, we can think I have to protect them, which one, we don't even know if you're right about they're going in the wrong way. But two, I have to allow them to make their decisions, to then deal with the consequences, to learn and grow, and then go forward from that. You can't think, okay, before it happens, I'm going to, remove every bad guy or bad girl that my child is going to date because I want to protect them. This goes back to something I talk about a lot, that you have to see, is it pain that's growth or pain that's damage? Sometimes it's a little bit blurry when it comes to relationships, but we have to allow for them to go through the growing pains, to date and break up if that happens, work on things, have fights on their own, and let them grow. And then as they get older, they can hopefully learn from those experiences themselves and make the better decisions. Not, I'm going to share my experience, which is what parents often say, tell them what to do and not to do, and make the decisions for them. So we do have to wrap up for today, but just some reminders of less is more when it comes to affecting your children's relationship. If anything, almost none. You should not be affecting it at all. But two, that you want to make sure you recognize you don't know what's right or wrong, and that you focus on your relationship with your child, and how you communicate with them is not about lectures, but it's more about listening. And if they want your advice, you can share it with them as your thoughts, not as facts that you know, but your thoughts, concerns, worries, and also let them share their thoughts on what you're bringing up, but make sure it's a conversation and not a lecture. All right, that brings us to the end of today's show. A big thank you to Ghazaleh here in the studio, in the new studios here at Radio Hamra. Thank you to all the callers and the listeners. You've been listening to In Session with Dr. Farid Holakouee. Have a wonderful day.